In this video, we're going to take a look at Photoshop layers. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back into Photoshop and again make sure that your actions are showing. And again, I'm going to work with the spiral book, so I'll go ahead and expand that, choose the template, and hit play. And it's going to give me my cover here. Now, what I want to do is I want to work with that cover and give it a little bit more of an effect on the page. And to give it some room here, what I'm going to do is I've got the move tool selected. I'm going to make sure that I'm on the cover layer, and I'm going to move cover up closer to the top here so that we can see what's going on with that. And then what I'm going to do is actually move my layers box up over top here, so that's a little bit closer to where we are working. Now you don't have to move these around. They're fine wherever they are on your screen. I'm doing this to show you, one, that you can do that. So if you've got the space on your screen and you want to have these items closer together, you can do that. I'm also doing that so that you can see it for the tutorial. And now what I'm going to do is I've got the cover here. I'm going to click on the magnifying glass here, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that we can see what effect this is having on this image. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and click on the FX to get the layer FX. And then I'm going to choose one of these, and I'm just going to start with the drop shadow. So now I have the drop shadow, and I don't know if you noticed yet, but there automatically got dropped a shadow on here. So you'll see that that gives the word cover a little bit more of a definition, so it kind of stands up off the page. And what we can do is we can play with these different settings to get that shadow to have the look that we want it to. So if I come here and I take the distance and I move the distance, you'll notice that that's shifting the distance on the shadow up here. Now the other thing that I can play with is the spread. So it's going to show me how much the spread is going, and I can move that up and down. So what is that separation going to be? And then the other thing that I can work on is the size. And I can adjust the size of that shadow. So the further that you get away, it's going to create more of just a big blur out there. So I'm going to move this back. And I'll just play with this until it gets to be looking the way that I want it to. And now I have my drop shadow effect on there. Now, the other effect that you could play with is the inner shadow. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and click on inner shadow, and I'll shift over and give it an inner shadow. And if you look now, what that did is it created a shadow on the inside of the letters. So when you did drop shadow, it was outside, and the inner shadow is going to be inside. If we want to see that look a little bit closer, what we could do is click on the check mark here to remove that drop shadow, and now you can see that inner shadow. And now we can go ahead and play with that inner shadow effect. And an inner shadow is going to make it look like it is carved into the cover. So again, you can change that distance, and then what they call the choke, and then the size. And we're just scrolling in through these. We're just clicking and dragging them to where we want them. And I'll turn my drop shadow back on. So now we have the look on our cover. We'll take a look at some of these others very quickly, just so that you have an idea of what they do. The next one down is the outer glow. This is going to give a little bit of a glow around the letters. In fact, as I go through these, I'm going to turn off the previous ones so that they kind of stand on their own. And then I'm going to take a look at the spread and the size. So this is very similar to what we were doing with the drop shadow, but it's more like it is glowing, just the way that the effect looks. And we could also change the color of that. So I just clicked on the color box, and we could choose the color that we want for that glow. And now we've got that outer glow. I'll go ahead and turn that off, and we'll move down here to inner glow. And with this text, we're really not going to see a big difference with the inner glow. Different settings on here might show you some color shadings, but with this image, it really isn't working well, or with this text, it isn't working well. We'll go ahead and take the inner glow off. Let's take a look at the bevel and emboss. And now this has an inner bevel. What that's going to do is it's going to give some rounding to it. And again, I can adjust the depth of it. It'll adjust how that's rounding. I can adjust the size. I could soften it a little bit if I wanted to. So you can just kind of adjust this to get it to look the way that you want it to have that bevel on there. You can adjust the shading so you can see where the shading is going. The biggest thing with these tools is just getting in here and playing and looking at the features based on the text that you have so that this actually looks the way that you want it to, and it really displays the image of your product. With the satin look, if I do it satin, it's going to give it kind of a satin look. With the cover, that may not be the best look that we're looking for, but you could play with that as well and play with those settings. I'm not going to mess with the satin too much. Again, it depends on what graphic or what text you're playing with. Now there is a color overlay, so we could adjust the color on there, keeping in mind that this also is going to adjust based on what you have in there. So with text, it may look one way, but if you're actually working with a graphic image, a logo, or something like that, that color overlay is going to give it a different effect. Now, it does have the opacity here, and you can adjust that a little bit. So if we turn that down, what's behind it is going to show through a little bit more. Now, there is a gradient overlay, so you can get a gradient to it. There's also a pattern overlay, and you can choose the pattern. There's a few patterns that you can choose from. You can go get patterns and put those in there. And then the last option that we have is the stroke, which will give a stroke against it, and you can choose a fill type. You can adjust the color. So you can adjust that as well. So those are the various layer styles. What you want to do is choose your item, adjust those effects, makes it real easy to do to get more of a look to your text. And of course, once you are all done with your modifications, you're going to go ahead and choose the second step, which is the go, and we're going to play, and it will go through and make our cover for us, but it will keep all the changes that we made, and now you can see that the cover there has the look based on the last settings that we had inside of those effects. So that's going to be the way that you can work with those layers.